All right, good morning, everyone. It's so great to have you here. We've got Taleen with us from Chetwoods. She's a London-based architect with a strong focus on sustainable design. This session will discuss considerations for integrating circular economy practices into architectural working methods, as well as how to ensure circular practices are carried through construction, building use, and end of use. Before we get started, I pass on to Taleen. I'm going to run over some housekeeping. Please leave your microphones on mute throughout the presentation. If you've got any questions, pop them in the chat box. We will go through them all at the end. If there's one you feel like you'd rather say in person, just pop in the chat box and say you want to say it in person, and then we'll go through that one at the end as well. The webinar is being recorded and will appear on Meshwork afterwards. I'm sure most of you on here will know what we're doing at Meshwork, but for any of you that don't, our mission is to develop Meshwork into the go-to place for sustainable design, education, and create an engaged community of members who are going to change the construction industry. Next week, as you will all know, COP26 is happening. So that's exactly what we're going to cover in November. We've got a really interesting set of webinars, and we've got a panel discussion happening. This is after COP26 as well. So our panel discussion is happening on the 17th. So if you've got time afterwards and still want to chat about it, we'll be there talking about it. But as always, our platform is free. If you know anyone who is interested in expanding their sustainable design knowledge, please pass it on. And so I'm just going to quickly go through what Mesh Energy do. We are an independent holistic energy consultancy. We're based in Surrey, but work on projects across the UK and the globe. We primarily work with design teams and architects to make the sustainable design process as simple and as cost effective as possible. Anyway, that is enough from me. I will pass on to Taleen and she'll go over her circular economy presentation.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, let me just see. Does that look good?
Looks perfect.
Okay, amazing. Great. So thank you everyone for coming. Today I'll talk to you about circular economy in practice. Just a quick overview of myself so you can get to know me. My background is as a US registered architect and Passivehaus Consultant with training in both the US and Sweden. And I'm here with two hats on today from Chetwoods. I'm a Thrive project manager where we act as both internal and external sustainability consultants, including helping to implement circular and net zero schemes. And then my second hat for today is speaking as a coordinator of the Architects Climate Action Network Circular Economy Working Group. And then I also on the side run an Instagram account focused on open source knowledge sharing and network building amongst like-minded individuals. But prior to my current roles at Chetwoods Architects and the Architects Climate Action Network, my previous work in circular economy included academic research on building material reuse in both a Swedish and European context through my master thesis and postgraduate research at Chalmers University. The main focus of the academic research was applying building material reuse as a method for reducing construction and demolition waste, as well as demand for new virgin materials in construction. And through this research, I created a methodology for finding and evaluating materials suitable for reuse. And based on that, a building design proposal employing circular design transformed into the concept form follows availability has been developed, taking into account locally available materials, the lifetime of the building and specified materials, as well as resilience against changing functions, cultural perceptions, and climatic conditions. And the reason I bring all this up from my academic background is that I'll then explain a little bit more later of how this approach manifests itself in the architectural workflow. So as I mentioned, speaking to you today from Chetwoods, which was established in London in 1988. The Chetwoods brand has three key elements: Studio, Works, and Thrive, and I'm part of the Thrive team. These components inspire, support, and complement each other. The grand concepts and imaginative leaps emanate from our studio, Works champions the digital delivery of projects and provides support to the teams in the use of innovative software and hardware to deliver sustainable architecture with a measurable positive impact on human well-being and the environment. And the Works team is currently developing digital twins as a tool, which is something I'll circle back to a little bit later on as well. And Thrive, which is my team, supports in the design and delivery of quality architecture that improves our health and enhances our environment. And our director, my colleague Philippa, was brought in to head up Thrive in 2018. Thrive created a structure and approach, which the other elements of the brand are now working in alignment with. And our team is also growing. For the past 2 seasons, we've been very fortunate to be able to offer a Thrive internship, which is both helpful for us and hopefully inspires young architects to advocate for sustainability in-house in their future careers. And just to give you an idea of how we work, you can see the structure of our organization here on the right-hand side. So we're a dedicated team, and then we feed into the larger project teams that are delivering the architectural projects to our clients by supporting them with design reviews, resource libraries, so providing guides, templates, references, and also CPD training and motivation to improve their own understanding. So I'll start out briefly to explain our approach and why and how we've integrated circular principles in our day-to-day. So according to the 2020 Circularity Gap Report published this past January, the world is now 8.6% circular. For all the discussion that we're having about circularity, this actually indicates a negative trend in action, down from 9% circularity reported in 2019 and 9.1% in 2018. And according to the report, this negative trend can be explained by 3 key related underlying trends: high rates of extraction of materials, ongoing stock buildup, and increasing but still low levels of end-of-use processing and cycling. And these underlying trends are deeply embedded within this take, make, waste tradition of the linear economy. These problems are actually hardwired. This frightening statistic demonstrates that significant changes need to be made across all industries, including the built environment. And we who work within the built environment all have a role to play in implementing this change. So in response to the built environment's massive use of resources and contribution to waste reduction, we've ensured that resources is one of our design drivers. And this sits along with 6 other design drivers that are aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals to ensure that we're designing holistically. These are carbon control, water, health and well-being, resilience, biodiversity, and value and cost. The end result of our work as architects is a building, but the building cannot exist without the sum of its materials. Therefore, the material resources are the architectural building blocks. Architects have been burned by value engineering time and time again, but we believe that with better, more robust interrogations to highlight the value added in materials, we can then lock them into the specification. This diagram that I'm showing right now illustrates the circulation of materials and some of the impacts of physical resources on the building and its inhabitants. So materials directly impact the building's embodied carbon, for example. They impact water usage. There are limited fresh water resources, and only 1% water is fit for human consumption. Material makeup directly impacts both human and environmental health. But the purpose of specifying reused materials, refurbished, bio-based, or recyclable materials is the following. So we need to reduce emissions now, preserve resources for the future, prevent and minimize future emissions and waste, and provide healthy environments for people and nature. And at a population of almost 8 billion, we are already consuming 1.7 Earth's worth of resources per year. In order to reduce emissions and support a growing population, there is a need to consider the life cycle of products. We must ensure the full value of the product, keeping it in circulation for as long as possible. And throughout the design process, resource and material selection are a crucial aspect of circular design. Across all projects, we then apply the circular economy principles, referring to the 6 R's, which is our in-house version of it. These 6 R's have been developed with reference to research. So the resource selection hierarchy in order of best to least desirable choices, as seen on the right-hand side, is reduce the project brief or scope, including unnecessary materials and high embodied energy materials. Question if a new building or construction is really required. The second is to retain existing buildings and materials if working within an existing building. Reuse materials and components as much as possible from local suppliers, including repair, refurbishment, and repurposing. Fourth is to recycle, then rot, then reject toxic and unethical products, refuse and dispose of hazardous and unhealthy materials. So we obviously wouldn't want to reuse materials which were actually quite unhealthy for us. And then if having to choose new materials, ensure that they have recycled content or are natural and or biodegradable. And then the 6 R's have been developed at Thrive as a building specific choice hierarchy based on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation circular economy diagram. But in order to create our selection hierarchy, we drew upon these tools that are prevalent in the industry. So as I mentioned, on the left, we see the well-known circular economy resource circulation diagram by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. The 3 main takeaways from this diagram are to design out waste and pollution, keep products and materials in use, and regenerate. Now, that we'd like to highlight is the separation of bio-based and technological materials as seen in the separate diagram loops in green and blue. When you create material composites by mixing bio-based and non-natural materials together, such as in textiles or trainers, they create a monstrous hybrid, a term used by McDonough and Braungart in their seminal book, Cradle to Cradle, which I'm sure many of you are already familiar with. But such a mixture is nearly impossible to remanufacture or reprocess. And it's unlike trying to unscramble an omelet, for example. Most often these products end up in landfill at the end of their useful lives. And on the right, we have a table from the UK GBC Circular Economy Guidance that I think was set out in 2019. This table is based on the lifespan categories for the R's, maintaining the value of materials for as long as possible. Length of life planning for a certain material is crucial for determining design and material selection strategy, which I will go a little bit deeper into when we go through our case studies. So in this table, they recommend for short life components of 0 to 5 and 5 to 10 years. The overall strategy is to design for disassembly and return to manufacturer or design for reconfiguration using modular systems. In long life component planning of 20 to 30 years, the overall strategy is to design for maintenance, replaceability, and remanufacture. And in even longer life component planning of 30 to 300 years, adaptability is the primary focus. And based on my earlier academic work, I've also identified four main design strategies relating to the circular economy. And these overlap with the themes identified with the UK GBC in their circular economy report. The main strategies are future transformation and adaptation, design with and for reuse, healthy interior environments to promote health well-being, and low environmental impact. And under each of these, you can find 3 sub-strategies, including designing in layers, which is referencing the Stewart brand sharing layers diagram, designing in standard dimensions, detailing for disassembly, specifying healthy materials, and minimizing a building's footprint using all environmental impact indicators. So applications of the circular economy principles in practice, let's get into it. The first thing to consider is a concept that I illustrated in my research. As mentioned earlier, form follows availability. Designing is no longer a linear process, rather it is iterative. As architects and designers, we need to rethink how we design, and we need a modified, flexible, non-linear workflow. In the diagram, I've shown that the design concept is influenced by the local contextual analysis, project brief, and local available materials. And a preliminary idea of the design concept can help dictate the materials that you aim to specify, but the actual local availability of materials and the access to specific materials at the time of construction can alter the design in both form and materiality. And the process of form following availability continues throughout the building's use stage as maintenance or modifications are required. And the building or its components at the end of life would then be disassembled, or end of use, I suppose, would be disassembled and re-enter the market to continue their lives in other ways. Ultimately, materiality should be considered early on in the design stage, even very loosely at stages 0 to 1, as availability can help drive the scheme using this concept. But looking beyond high-level material selection strategies, in order to ensure that the individual materials that we select are meeting the goals laid out, we need to be able to track robust material and product data using tools like material passports. Material passports should provide a wide variety of in-depth information about the materials. To mention a few typical They should contain typical applications, material origin, certifications like FSC and cradle to cradle, chemical makeup, embodied carbon, water usage, and expected lifespan, amongst a great deal of other data. And this information should be provided by the manufacturer. If it's not immediately available, designers and specifiers should be taking the time to inquire more about the information. Transparency is key in this specification. And to the right, we have some good material declaration examples. These are tools in progress, some of which are not available to everyone at this time, but some which are currently available. So for example, one that is available now is the top left image, which is the Midaster platform from the Netherlands, which has a database of registered materials and can provide material passports from within their software alongside BIM integration. Below that, you can also see the Declare label, also in use now, associated with the Living Future Institute, which focuses on the material impact on health and well-being and is modeled after food labels. So quite easy to read. And then the top right image shows the documentation of a reclaimed material from the EU project FCRBE. And the bottom right is a screenshot from the Materials Passport platform prototype by the EU project BAM, Buildings as Material Banks. And that one is currently not widely available or useful at the moment, but still in production. So while we're waiting for material passport and circularity tools to become a bit more developed and standardized, we at Thrive have done our own analysis of the materials we specify regularly, including asking additional hard questions to the manufacturers, pushing them for cradle to cradle information. And from this, we've created our own internal material passports organized by building layer. And the building layers are shown in the sharing layers diagram here to the left, originally developed by Stuart Brand in 1994. The basic concept is that the various layers of the building, the site, structure, skin, services, space plan, and stuff, they all have a different expected lifetimes, depending on wear and tear, aging, and replacement based on cultural factors, for example. But the longer, more robust layers of building, such as the skin and structure, have the greatest environmental impacts and stay in use the longest, hopefully. By collecting material data, such as material embodied energy, chemical content, etc., it provides a greater case to include materials that we specify in buildings and serves as a better comparison tool. And we drew on the EU Buildings as Material Banks project guidance and added our own additional criteria to create these. Much of the information that we have captured on the material passports internally is required as part of the GLA detailed circular economy statement, bill of materials, and end-of-life strategy tables, which we'll come to in a few minutes. And drawing upon our 6 Rs, we know that using virgin materials is not the best option, that we should look to materials already in circulation, such as those found in the existing building cadastre, thereby reducing further emissions and demand for virgin materials. So in doing so, we look to identify locally available materials by creating a local resourcing map, which Duncan Baker Brown gave a few excellent examples of in his Mesh CPD a few weeks ago. A project team should identify sources of salvaged and secondhand materials to be applied in new construction and renovation. If no appropriate salvage materials are available, the scope of the search can be widened to include materials with recycled content and locally sourced bio-based products. And in order of selection preference, which it relates again back to the resource hierarchy of the 6 Rs, the first priority should be given to buildings to be demolished in the near future so that materials never have a chance to enter the waste stream. Secondly, select materials available at secondhand building material retailers. Thirdly, products available on the market from industry byproducts, post-recycling, post-consumer. And fourth, bio-based, locally sourced products. Of course, you do need to consider the trade-offs. For example, if you're looking at British steel, it's often higher in embodied carbon than some of its European counterparts due to differences in the production processes and the availability of recycled content in that particular location. We also want to prioritize mining existing buildings to keep potential resources in circulation and prevent good materials from ever entering the waste stream. When auditing existing buildings for materials, one must ensure that the quality of the data is good. On a project, we did have a point cloud survey done, but by the time it stretched the full length of the building, the dimensions actually were not accurate. So here I've shown an example of what an audit might look like, including information of quantities, quality, reuse potential, and disassembly methods. And this example was taken from my research in Sweden, where I visited a number of underutilized barns to create a series of material audits, quantifying and qualifying their existing material stocks. And after the initial building survey, which I actually did by hand, I recreated the buildings in Rhino to get material takeoffs and create a catalog from which to shop for new office proposal, utilizing over 80% of reused materials. And then to ensure that any good done in the design stages is carried forward in the future, tracking materials and their future journey is very important. Material passport data integrated into BIM models can then help track these new and reused materials and components in existing and new construction with a digital thread. With this thread, each item can easily be identified with the associated material characteristics and asset history integrated into the software, making tracking materials in buildings quite simple. And to do this correctly, we should emulate what the more advanced sectors are doing, such as car manufacturers, making investments into digital twins, aka intangible assets, to eliminate resource waste of the tangible assets, which is the building. Making this material data and creating BIM models should be done at all stages of the design process. Not only does BIM model help predict buildings' embodied carbon and operational energy demand for some examples, it can also provide circularity metrics for early stage analysis through to stage 4, aiding the architect in making fully informed design decisions at all stages of work. At Chetwoods, the Works team is developing digital twins, as I mentioned earlier. The concept of digital twin originates from product lifecycle management, but has since cascaded into virtually every facet of engineering, including architecture. And as architects, we're also the creators of the 3D representation or the digital twin / avatar of the client's asset. A digital twin of the building in its use can become essential in minimizing carbon emissions, mitigating health and safety risks for staff returning to work in indoor environments, and is used for preventative building maintenance. It can also track the materials in the building through their installation, lives, and potential removal to maintain the building owner's material investment. Should parts or the entirety of the building need to be deconstructed at any point, the designers and deconstruction contractors will have a full history of the existing materials on site and will be able to efficiently plan for their reuse, resale, or reapplication with all relevant information digitally connected to each component. And this technology is being integrated into projects such as the completed logistics building project seen here. The 3D model is assigned to sensors that document the building. This information is then fed through the digital twin platform to provide regular updates on how the building is performing. And this process of capturing building performance helps inform future design decisions as well. The reports will let you know if materials, plant, etc., need to be reviewed for maintenance, or if they're due for regularly scheduled maintenance with regular reports to your phone. And the sensors placed on building components can track major events in the building's life, including events that affect the quality or, for example, the structural bearing capacity of materials. And this would happen in the case of a fire, earthquake, extreme events of loadings that were not initially designed in, which could then affect the future reapplication at the end of use of, for example, the steel structure. So it's an excellent tool that can help bring us towards reuse at a larger scale. We do have a few case studies utilizing circular economy principles from which I could draw lessons learned today, but I'll just focus on 2 of them, the Bay Tree Tech Hub and Morden Wharf, pictured at the top and bottom here respectively. But just a quick mention of the other 2 images in the center. There are examples of our spatial repurposing focus utilizing hidden spaces, which we implemented at the Sainsbury's Digital Lab, once a basement level printing facility for the Daily Mail. And we're also maximizing unused spaces in our dark hotels, looking at the future uses of NCP car parks. So the Bay Tree Tech Hub, when Thrive was founded over 2 years ago, the Bay Tree Tech Hub was the first project that we were involved in. The client wanted everything in the building to tell a story, and we took this as an opportunity to apply circular design principles to the construction. This Tech Hub can then be deployed from one site to another by the client. And the Tech Hub won a Business Green Award and was nominated for the AJ 100 Best Use of Technology Awards. It was designed as a marketing hub that housed a BIM cave inside, where clients could go in and see the virtual model and select their finishes to avoid Category B fit-out waste. And in the images, you can see a selection of furnishings and finishes where great care was taken to select low energy, recycled, and reclaimed materials for the temporary buildings' interiors to reduce the overall climate impact. And the floors were left unfinished, save for a sealant finish. We chose reclaimed table legs from another office. The chairs were 100% post-consumer waste that can then be sold back to the manufacturer in the end, if they so choose. And then the second case study, we'll go a little bit more in depth. I'll discuss the Morden Wharf project, where Chetwoods was appointed by UNI to develop the commercial elements of a strategic industrial location that once housed the former Tate & Lyle Sweeteners refinery. The challenge was here to provide a viable industrial solution that allows optimum flexibility while being bold with the design approach to create a cohesive community with the neighboring residential development. And a variety of buildings have been proposed that include the conversion of an existing building that engages with the public realm, a new build warehouse for a large single operator, a business incubator for small and mid-sized enterprises, and a makerspace facility for small creative industrial businesses, while creating a vibrant gateway to the development. And the overall site will be redeveloped as a 178,000 square meter mixed use scheme expected to deliver 1,500 homes with 35% affordable and a large riverfront public park in addition to the industrial element. The project has now received planning consent, and on this case study, I'll explain the scope of information provided in 2 stages of statements to the Greater London Authority Planning Office for this project, including the overall circular economy strategies and commitments. And these statements were submitted at REBA stages 0 to 1, 2 to 3, respectively, for developments on the existing brownfield site and the alterations to the existing building, the facade of which you can see here on the right-hand side of the image. And as many of you probably already know, the GLA now requires a circular economy statement to be provided for referable applications at planning submissions. And this is part of the London Plan policy, reducing waste and supporting circular economy. And there are 3 main stages of statements that need to be delivered. So first, the draft or outline statement, which is produced during REBA stages 0 to 1. Secondly, the detailed statement at the full planning application during REBA stages 2 to 3. And thirdly, the planning updates and post-completion updates undertaken during REBA stages 4 to 7. And the Morden Wharf project qualified as a referable application due to the number of residential units on site. And Chetwoods provided input for both the outline and detailed statements for the commercial buildings, while OMA, who did the residential designs, contributed on the new residential buildings under their purview. The process of collating the circular economy statement strategies and commitments was then undertaken by the Morden Wharf engineers Ramble for submission to planning. So at step 1, the outline circular economy statement, we established the strategic approach and agreed to the circular metrics and targets for this project. The decision tree seen here in the center, provided in the GLA guidance document, can help prompt the design team to choose a strategic approach. And this tree is directly correlated to table 2 on the right-hand side from the 2019 UK GBC Circular Economy Report that maps component length of life against design strategy, as mentioned earlier on. In the outline statement, the strategic approaches that we identified were organized by building layer, and we're maintaining the existing structure, about half of the existing roof. Currently, the existing building is single occupancy, but it will be subdivided into multiple spaces to accommodate for future tenants. And each unit is a shell and core finish with a tenant fit out. And the strategic approaches that we targeted on this project for the renovation include providing ease of access to promote regular maintenance. All new components are to be designed for future disassembly and component reuse, including bolted steel structural elements instead of welding them. Specification and standard non-specialized dimensions for future potential reuse. On-site energy production with roof-mounted PVs, and utilizing sustainable resourcing policies and sourcing materials from within a reasonable radius to the project, contributing to reducing the building's embodied energy. And then the detailed circular economy statement was significantly more involved than the outline statement, as it required that we consider metrics that we would not typically have at this early stage. In response to the GLA request, Ramble then provided us with a tool based on the required tables from the GLA statement guidance, which we then populated. And these included a bill of materials, recycling and waste strategies, end-of-life strategies, and metrics. And we're doing a fairly light touch on this project. At the moment, the main space is programmed for a brewery with a tap room and beer brewing uses. So we therefore had minimal material calculations as the use remains fairly raw and industrial. However, it does require us to both review environmental product declarations, also known as EPDs, of relevant materials, as well as reach out to manufacturers to inquire about materials embodied carbon and material content if no EPD was listed. And on this particular project, essentially no product that we had wanted to specify had an EPD. So there was a lot of chasing of materials manufacturers on this one. And then ahead of quantifying the new materials in the building, we had commissioned a point cloud survey, which was crucial in providing the accurate material takeoffs that were required for this statement. When filling out the bill of materials, we considered the material intensities for new materials to be installed in the existing building, as well as their end of use strategies. And this was quite difficult at stage 3 when we submitted the detailed statement, as not all of the materials had yet been specified, but the spatial planning was already complete. In order to report the material intensities, we found the areas of materials as well as source the weight of materials from EPDs or other available material data from manufacturers. The material quantity was quantified by weight in kilos, and the material intensity was then found by dividing the weight of each respective material by its area according to the model. And the quantities and metrics required to fill in the tables are points that we wouldn't typically have thought about at this early stage. However, if we can measure the metrics and targets, then we can ensure that the projects are delivered to meet circularity goals. So now we're more prepared for the next time that this comes up, which it is already coming up in other projects. So I've discussed how Chetwoods as an individual practice is incorporating circular economy principles into our work. However, these practices need to become more widespread to make systemic change and move away from the take, make, waste culture on a greater level. So let's talk about the next steps to achieve this. Outside of work, I am a coordinator of the Architects Climate Action Network Circular Economy Group as a result of my interest in building material reuse. So what is ACAN, aka the Architects Climate Action Network? It's a voluntary network of individuals from within architecture and its related built environment professions, taking critical action to transform our industry in the face of climate and ecological crises. Our mission is that we exist to address the way our built environment is made, operated, and renewed in response to the climate emergency. And as a network of individuals, we channel personal energy, expertise, and action towards a common goal, the systemic change of our profession and the construction industry as a whole. And we see this as a matter of urgency. Our mission is to mobilize a new movement of professional activists towards this goal by building an open, supportive, and inclusive organization. ACAN empowers individuals to proactively seek change and facilitates collective effort through a shared platform built on collaboration. Our manifesto has 3 overarching aims. The first is decarbonize now, pushing for more ambitious regulation that we urgently need. Second is ecological regeneration, recognizing that more is needed than reaching net zero. There's a bigger crisis of ecological breakdown, and ultimately the goal of net positive impact on biodiversity and natural environment is quite crucial. And then the third one is cultural transformation, bringing agency back to the architect, encouraging a more collaborative environment, and inspiring workplace activism, creating change within our everyday jobs. So in alignment with our values and principles, the ACAN Circular Economy Group hosted the free knowledge sharing lecture series, the Circular Series, this past spring. And our Circular Economy Group mandate is the Circular Economy Group is working to push for a radical shift in the construction industry so that all buildings in the UK are designed and built in line with circular economy principles. It's our mission to challenge and redefine the value systems at the heart of our industry and education systems, facilitating a transition to a circular economy through a reimagination of current building practices to enable regenerative design at all scales and stages of a project. We ran the series to hear from practitioners and researchers about how they apply circular economy principles across all of the architectural stages set out by REBA, and these stages being strategic definition, spatial coordination, handover. Yeah, I mean, you know them all, but I guess most notably the proposed stage of work that we'd like to add, which is stage 8 over here, that we have named deconstruction, in order to close the loop on the work. The idea of the lecture series was to tap into the collective hive mind, to learn from others' experiences and understand what needs to be done at which stage of design, construction, building end of use, building use. And all events were free. The tickets sold ranged from 200 to 1,300 per event, which was quite shocking, but amazing. And audiences were mostly practicing UK architects between the ages of 29 to 35, with the rest being students, landscape architects, engineers, and sustainability consultants. So we did notice I was targeting a very specific demographic within the architectural sector. We're hoping to change that and broaden it a bit. And during each live event, we hosted an interactive Miro board where audience members could ask questions, comment, and post helpful resources. Speakers and other audience members were then encouraged to respond to the various notes to collect a written documentation of the barriers, opportunities, and questions prevalent amongst industry members in regard to circular economy in the built environment. And this created a public knowledge base so that we can facilitate a speedy transition towards a circular economy. And all the videos are now available to view on demand on our ACAN YouTube channel, as well as blog posts that summarize the takeaways from each event as quick references. And the Circular Economy Group is continuing our work off the back of the live lecture series to amalgamate all the resources and data collected and create a publication for architects to take back to their practices and implement the learnings in their offices, just as a first step. And then the next step that we are looking to take is to create an interactive open source resource library that provides high-level guidance for designers looking to design with and for reuse, as well as connect them to a library of details, case studies, and other useful references. And of all the information collected during the speaker and interactive portions of the series, I'd like to highlight some of the key headlines and gaps in knowledge that need to be addressed. Many of these came out during our interactive collaboration discussions during the Stage 8 event. So the first, which we're hopefully working right now to address, is that we need a reference library for policy, technical details, and case studies focused on deconstruction, reuse, and circular economy. We need industry-wide guidance to help determine bespoke, context-driven circular project strategies. We need circularity and reuse as a design and building strategy to be built into the project brief in order to accurately set the project fee and time schedule. We need the establishment of benchmark targets and metrics for reuse of buildings, materials, components, etc. And we need an understanding of connection between embodied energy figures and material reuse. So we at ACAN engage in collective agency. Through cross-industry collaboration and cooperation, we strive to complement, but not to replicate the work of others. So just in the Circular Economy Group alone, we have members taking part in the UKGBC Whole Life Carbon Reductions via Circular Economy Principles Working Group to input on national guidance for the built environment. There's one member on the BSI, aka British Standards Institution Committee, for developing standards for circular economy in the construction sector. We join in on speaking engagements, panel discussions, events, etc. And then other ACAN members are also part of Architects Declare and LEDI, aka the London Energy Transformation Initiative working groups. The first group, Architects Declare, being a bit more geared towards practices rather than individuals like we are. And by engaging across all of these groups, we can feed back into our network about what is happening in the industry now. We're clued into collaboration potentials, and we can share what ACAN is doing with these other groups so that we can continuously build on the collective work rather than operating inside of echo chambers. And as mentioned earlier, we at the ACAN Circular Economy Group are currently identifying the existing barriers and opportunities using both our own work experiences and the Circular Series data to highlight what we need to change to facilitate wide-scale implementation of circular economy principles in the architectural workflow, services, and construction use and processes. And we'll be publicizing our findings hopefully early next year. See how work progresses. Looking to the long term, though, we have high hopes for the upcoming UN conference in Glasgow of COP26, which we tie into our future planned campaigns to realize our hopes of encouraging wider policy change to promote circular economy in practice, promoting awareness and understanding of the circular economy in the built environment, and adopting tax reform to support building component reuse. We're planning to campaign in the future for, well, of course, our guidelines, as mentioned, of best circular industry practice. We want to campaign for a new REBA Stage 8, including guidelines for pre-deconstruction audits that would support architects in offering this as a typical service. And also tax reform to counteract the current taxation rate of 20% on materials and labor for refurbishment in the UK versus 0% tax on new build construction, which is currently a major financial barrier in implementing this more widely. So yeah, collaboration across companies and industry groups is the key for moving forward together quickly toward a future that supports building material reuse. And there are a number of groups to join or even just to follow to get the latest up-to-date information. So in Europe, we have a number of Architects Climate Action Network groups from the UK to Spain to the Nordic countries. Of course, the UK group would be the most relevant in this context. You can also join the Architects Declare group if your practice is signed on to that. There are so many places to get involved, but we're always looking for more professionals to join us in our work. And I'll just throw in a shameless plug here for people to join the Circular Economy group as we develop the guidance that I mentioned earlier. I want to thank you all for your attention. I'll answer some questions now. And if you would like to discuss any further, please reach out using my contact details provided here. Thank you.
Thank you, Taleen. That was amazing. And I fully agree, like the concept of collaborating together. We're all here, we all want to make a difference. Let's put our heads together and see what we can come up with. It's exciting, and it's great to see what ACAN is doing and sharing your circular series, which was amazing. There's still a few more that I need to watch on it, but I've thoroughly enjoyed watching most of them. So if anyone has any questions, please pop them in the chat box, or if it's something you want to say in person, just unmute yourself and ask Taleen. But while people are thinking, I was wondering, with your material passports, did you, when you started implementing that and asking for them, did you get much of a pushback, or were they quite easy to access?
So the material passports is just something that we are keeping in-house. We're not sharing them externally, but we do send the materials questionnaires out to or to the manufacturers, and sometimes we will get a response, and other times we have to push fairly hard. Some manufacturers have been very forthcoming in providing the information, whereas others were less so. And we noticed that it was typically, if there was a kind of a promise of us buying the product, then they were more likely to answer the question. So if it was for a specific upcoming project rather than our general library, they were much more likely to respond with the answers that we were needing to provide. But now that we do need to be thinking about the circular economy statements, we need this information if the EPDs are not available. So unfortunately, we won't be able to specify products unless we can get this information. So it does give us stronger push, and we can then be backed up by the need to state these things in the policy.
That's interesting. So obviously you're saying one pushback is if it's just for information and they don't have a project with you, but is there a real understanding of why they're just not willing to share that information? Because even if they were put in your library, then you're probably more likely to use them for a future project anyway.
Yeah, I think it is a lot to answer, but then also I mean, actually, we have it available. I'll see if I can link it in the chat here, because we put out in a journal post in April, I think, all of our questions that we typically ask.
Mhm.
And it is quite a lot of information to answer, but we think that if we push the manufacturers to answer these questions, and they'll realize that architects and designers and engineers are all looking for that information. The more people to ask, the better. And then they'll provide it as like a typical like resource instead of having to chase down people individually. At the same time, I think that they will probably be getting different designers and architects asking questions in maybe 20 different times, and then it might be too much to answer each one individually. So that could potentially be a problem.
Okay, yeah, it does sound like to get in front of the curve before everyone starts asking it, it's get it pre-created.
Yeah.
I had one more. So obviously you've done loads of, like, you showed us some case studies. Are these directly related to ones that you've got through developers? Because I find that interesting with numerous architects I've spoken to. They say they've got some developers which allow them to do great like circular projects or more sustainable projects, and they've got some that it's so difficult, but they still need the work.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a similar thing at Chetwoods, or do you just say, no, if you're not going to abide by our ways, we're not going to work with you?
That's a really difficult question, and I'm not sure if I can comment for Chetwoods as a whole, because I have my personal like values that I would like to uphold, but then you also have the reality of you have a business, you have to make sure that there's enough projects for all the people that work there. However, what we do when we can get in with the clients at the very start or in the first couple of meetings, we try to get in there and ask those leading questions to kind of open their eyes a bit to see what are the possibilities, kind of bring in the broader context. So we'll have some of those kind of like shock and awe kind of presentations where we'll start off with like, these are the problems, like we need to deal with them. And then we'll swoop in and say, and we can help provide solutions and that kind of thing. So that will then kind of lead them to be a bit more open, I think, about what they're willing to consider, because then it's not just someone saying, you need to do this, and then they don't have the background information. We're trying to educate at the same time and bring context at the same time as we're recommending better practice. So it is kind of like a slow buildup, it feels like, but I think we are also making quite a lot of progress, and we do end up having, like you can see on LinkedIn, when you read an article, you can see who's looked at it. And I've noticed that more and more clients are actually, once we've had these discussions, they're actually looking at the things that we produce, and they'll come to us with more questions, and they'll go out of their way to have calls with us to understand a bit more about why we're pushing them in this direction. And I think that's really positive.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, education is definitely the way to change all the different aspects of the industry, because it's not just architects, it's developers, it's policy, and that's great seeing what ACAN is doing, is pushing policy change will inevitably affect developers in the future as well. So that's really great.
Yeah, but I will add to that also that we don't only want people who are already working on this or like already had this as a target, because we need to make change for everyone. So we want to kind of infiltrate even the worst offenders. So then we can go from the inside. Get in there from the inside and try to like push them and educate them, or just change some of their perspectives so that continuously do better, because we don't want to close ourselves off and kind of live in that echo chamber, as I mentioned earlier, because that doesn't really help us move forward as a society.
No, you're definitely right. Having those hard conversations, which may be quite difficult to begin with, could really be fruitful in the end. So
yeah.
I mean, that was brilliant. If you want to share those links with me, I will share the ACAN link and the circular series as well on the post I'll do afterwards. But yeah, it was amazing, like so useful. And I know everyone here will say the same. But yeah, thank you so much, Taleen. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. And I just popped in our link to the questions that we typically ask manufacturers if we're out to get this information for our internal use in the chat box. So hopefully that's helpful for people. And do send back any comments or responses if you think that there are ways to improve it, because I think it's good to have feedback and continue improving. And there are lots of different perspectives to consider. So yeah.
Brilliant. All right. If that's it and no one else has any questions, we will end the webinar here. Thank you again. All right.
Thank you.